So now we have our broker connected to our network. We can actually now start to configure and set up the monitoring and configuration of the topology within the broker. So in essence, what we're going to do now is we're going to log into our cVu400NG 400. And you can see we have, in this particular case, 40 different ports that are available to us. And I've installed two SFP modules into ports 1 and 2 and another one into port number 24. And then what we need to do now is we need to tell our cPacket broker what we want to do with each of those ports. So in my particular case, port number 24 here is connected to my cStore analytics platform, so that I can capture and save all of the packets that are coming into my broker. And my ports 1 and 2 are connected to, in this particular case, my internet gateway, my router. So what I can do now is I can go into our topology screen, and you can see I have that here. What I can do is I can now configure each of those 40 ports to represent the data and the information that I want. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually label the ports that I'm interested in. So I click on the port details, and you can see port number 1 is here, and you can see currently it's set to a 10 gigabit port. It's an input port. There is no time stamping, and we're in a standard traffic mode. We're not going to do any additional functionality on that port. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this port to my ingress on my router, and port number 2 is my egress port. So the actual connections on each of those SFPs is going into my tap, which is then looking at each of the individual transmit and receive lines coming in and out of my router, and I'm separating each of those interfaces, so transmit and receive, into separate ports on my broker. The other thing I need to do is I need to set up my port number 24, because that's the one that I have connected to my cStore, and I'm going to call that my ag port for the time being. Once I've done that, I can now save that configuration, and the labels have now been updated within my system. So I can now close that and bring back to my main configuration. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to define each of my individual ports. So at the moment, all my ports are set to inputs. But what I need to do is I need to change port number 24 and make that one an output port. Okay, so port number 24 is now an output port, and port numbers 1 and 2 are inputs. So the other thing that I need to do is my input ports are actually 1 gig SFPs, so I need to change both of those to 1 gig. And I also want to timestamp every packet that comes in to each of those ports. So I'll switch on the timestamping on those. My output port is port 24, and it's a 10 gig port, and we're good to go there. And then the final thing that I need to do here now is I need to connect the ports. So I need to connect port number 1 to port number 24, and port number 2 to port number 24 as well. So now any traffic that comes in on either of those ports will be relayed to port number 24 after they've been timestamped, and then they will be sent to my cStore, which will then start to save and store every single packet that's now coming in. So I'm going to activate that configuration now, okay, which will take a few seconds, and that's now running. So we should now be able to see on each of our devices now that is our ag port and our egress and ingress ports, which are linked to port number 24. So effectively what we've now done is we've said any traffic that comes in on either of those ports is to be timestamped and forwarded to port number 24. So that in theory now configures and confirms all the configuration for those ports. And again, if we now go to our port details, we should now see that our ports have updated, our timestamps have been verified, and our port information has now been configured and saved.